cinematographer of Pan's Labyrinth, Guillermo Navarro. The Pale Man and the Fawn himself, Mr. Doug Jones. And writer, director, producer, Guillermo Del Toro.
Thank you. Thank you. Now let's see if this chair takes me.
Welcome all to the David Geffen Theater.
Thank you, man. Best theater in the world.
Thank you.
Best theater in the world. It's rare to find a great screening room that is warm to watch a movie, because a lot of the good ones are very cold to the screening, and that is perfect.
Okay.
This is amazing.
Does the red help, do you think? The red seats help
like it.
the vibrant?
I like it.
Yeah, I do too.
You can clean blood very easily.
Okay. So, as we look back on this film, you know, it's 16 years ago. When you were making this film, when you were conceiving this film, and you're such a visual filmmaker, was there a first image that occurred to you for this film?
Yeah, well, there were different things. There were the crucial ones or the first one. Obviously, the first one was the Labyrinth and the Fawn, and the Fawn being fused with the rock and the moss and the earth and the roots. Now, I didn't know exactly how he was going to look, but I knew he needed to look like he was of a piece with the Labyrinth. That much, and it came from reading a combination of fairy tales and neo-paganistic horror, like Arthur Machen and Algernon Blackwood, you know, and this idea of the Labyrinth by the moonlight. Those were the first images, I would say.
And so would you say you had the Labyrinth or you had the Fawn first, or they kind of both coexisted?
They were the same thing.
They were the same thing?
Yeah, they were together.
And to bring Doug into the conversation, you had just made Hellboy beforehand.
Yes.
I mean, just within a few years. Yes, please, Hellboy.
Thank you.
And so I would love to know. Yeah, so all of you worked on Hellboy together. How was that experience going from, for both of you, going from a big production to something smaller scale, and then from working with Doug as Ape Sapien to these other roles? How was that shift for all of you?
Well, I like going from big movies to smaller movies. I like it because it keeps you honest and it keeps you scared. Both things are very important. So I liked it a lot, but everything that could go wrong on Pan's Labyrinth went wrong. Every single thing was, and the crew also thought we were insane. The Spanish crew thought I was a complete fool in the mountain, screaming nonsense. And I think it changed the day we shot this scene. They kind of realized there was something afoot. But the first day he showed up in a fascist period movie as a Fawn, and he couldn't see, and I was guiding him in, and Doggy was like, oh, God bless, God bless. They were like, what is this American dressed as a Fawn doing in a fascist period movie? So it was weird.
How was that for you, Doug, that experience?
Well, Guillermo Del Toro is the only person who could have pulled all that off. I will say that up front.
Yes.
And you know, when I read the script for this, I wiped my tears away at the last page and said, "Oh my gosh, I have to be in this movie." And I knew that, like you said, going from Hellboy to this was a big studio, multi layers of decision makers. This was his movie, his and his alone. And so I knew we were in very good hands. With the script that I just read and knowing his directing style, I knew that what he wrote was going to be what was going to be on film as I imagined it, and it sure as heck was. Yeah.
Yeah, so what was your...
Well, I have to say something like that. So, we were going from, we made all kinds of different movies and sizes, but I think the big difference was what he's mentioning is that here in this world you have creative control of what you're doing. You don't have to be approved, discussed, questioned. Say, no, it's not too big, it's too blue. So we were really on our own. So this is really a product of us. No?
We did 135 days of shoot on Hellboy. 135, Monday through Saturday.
We were zombies.
And then Sunday I edited. So the last week we were the living dead. We really
Hellboy
were.
2?
Hellboy 1, 135 days. In the cold, frozen, and I always fall in every movie I shoot. I fall, I roll down a mountain. The most humiliating fall you can imagine. The crew, I come in like Otto Preminger, and then I roll down a hill. I fall like Peter from Family Guy. And in this movie it was frozen in the ruins, you remember, on Hellboy, and I fell down and the focus bullet said, "Look at the fat one roll." I fell on Panzavers, by the way.
There's a lot of hills there.
Into
I
an
mean.
open grave.
It's also, so you guys know, it's also as fun as this. Because we laugh constantly on set.
Yeah.
We really enjoy the process and would like to be there,
Yes.
which is not necessarily the case in many other occasions.
And no matter what the budget, we do that. That's the fun. I mean, look, we're doing these movies, and we did Hellboy 2 and 1. We do no second unit, and we shoot everything. And so, we have that in common. We shoot the big movies as if they were small movies.
Yeah, they created the incredible conditions of 6 night weeks.
Cold
They
night.
haven't heard of unions there, but yeah.
Somebody interviewed somebody the other day in Canada, and they said, "How is it to be working with Guillermo?" And the answer was, "Wet and cold."
Always.
It's very accurate.
Rain in every movie of his.
And cold.
And it's cold.
But this one was shot during a drought, wasn't it?
It was a drought, but at night it was brutal. We had the worst of both worlds. But the drought, yes, there had been an enormous fire. Enormous, the biggest in this century, and so they didn't allow us to use anything that had fire. So everybody was doing this with the guns. We couldn't use blanks.
Yeah.
We couldn't use squibs. So everything was digital. And the last day of shooting there, the firemen got bored and they went for a coffee, and we blew up the truck. It was the last day, and I literally said, "Fuck it, let's blow up. They're not here."
Yeah, but for instance, I just remember when we could not use fire and we had all the scene of the attack of the place. And the way that we had to do it was I had to bring big dimmers of theaters with big finales and do fade-ins of lights and then creating the explosions. That's completely theatrical.
Yeah, all the explosions at night are Guillermo backlighting steam. And then we had a cannon, a mortar on the ground blowing up mud. Yeah. No fire element.
No fire at all.
No.
Amazing.
Yeah, we couldn't. But that's when people say
That's because we're Mexicans and we learn to work with them.
Exactly. I tell you, being Mexican, you give me 2 pieces of chewing gum and I'll make an epic. I don't care.
And I mean, some of the resourcefulness as well is because the story takes place in a single location. I mean, more or less, between the labyrinth and the mansion, the house. Was that by design? Was that by choice? Or was that just a budgetary reason?
Well, no, it was by design. I mean, the thing is, this movie, every single thing you see is real, it's built. There's nothing real. So we had to design everything to fit on 185 beautifully, like a painting. And it's very, very hard to, but this movie cost exactly the same as Shape of Water, 19.3 million. Exactly the same number. And it was shot, everything was built. In fact, there's a funny story. You see, there is that pigeon coop by the side of the house, the main house. That pigeon coop was supposed to be a giant pigeon coop. It was like out of Spinal Tap when they bring down the Stonehenge monument. We went in to see the construction, and the production designer, it was his first movie, first big movie production designer. And he says, look, this is the pigeon coop. And Guillermo and I said, this is tiny. It was supposed to be a big scene, and I'll shoot it in another movie.
I also want to ask, I mean, there is an obsession, I shouldn't use the word obsession, but there is a recurring motif of eyes,
Yeah.
right? The first time Ophelia picks something up, it's a piece of the eye of the stone. The labyrinth itself, the design above it is missing eyes. Obviously, it's very prevalent as Doug plays. The Fawn, the eyes themselves evolve through the movie, right? They start quite clouded and they get quite clearer. What's that?
And then the eyes.
And then, of course, most famously, these eyes. So, was there also another decision about that motif of eyes, or did they just keep,
No,
like a better term, popping
it's
up?
in most of my movies. It's a motif of great importance in Nightmare Alley. It's a motif of great importance is the theme, or one of the themes of Shape of Water, which is how we look, the gaze of each other. And we had a company for a while that was called Mirada, you know? And I think the idea for me is only those that know how to look will find magic in this world, because there is none if you don't know where to look. And that's the idea at the end with the little flower. If you know where to look, there's magic. And this came from what made me make this movie was I felt that I was making movies that I didn't feel they were gonna leave anything behind. And it's not about posterity, because what has it done for me lately, right? But it's about I thought of the movies that made me survive this life when I was a kid, because movies saved my life and my sanity a few times. And I thought, can I make one of those for anyone that needs it? You know, it's sort of silly, but I think of my movies as songs that are a soundtrack for somebody's life, you know, that can be useful. It doesn't matter if it's Pacific Rim is one type of song, and this is another type of song. And I think people can play those songs, because to me, the people that like my movies, I'm fortunate that they connect to them in the same molecular way that I connected with the things I loved as a kid. So it came from, can I give them something to look at?
Fascinating. And I have to ask, speaking, you brought it up already, the 185 frame. You're very keen on using a 185 frame. Only. Right. So how was that working? And also, I want to ask about the notion of the drifting, moving frame. I don't think there is a stationary shot in the entire film,
Never.
right? The camera's always...
I think we've used the tripod once on Chronos. And that's it. No, we were tired. The camera always moves. We got together on my first movie, Chronos, and we decided on 185 for many reasons, including that scope was invented by producers and not directors. You know, it was to get people to leave TV, and then it became an affectation a little bit, and then it found its true purpose. But I'm not prone to that, except if I shoot a Western, I'll go scope. But 185 is very close to the golden measure that the Greeks enunciated for all artistic endeavors, and closer to the perfect measure on nature. And it allows me to do arches, which are vertical information, and so forth. And at this point, I'm a crusty old goat. I can only imagine composition on 185, and Guillermo and I agreed very much early on, no?
Yeah, I mean, that's been our frame all the time.
Then how was for you as kind of that moving camera? I mean, it's a style that you had developed already, and was that tough? I mean, for you, Doug, as you're performing, to kind of know where the camera was?
Of course it's tough. It's very tough. But the thing is that the film, we are really engaged with the film language. We believe that the images are part of the storytelling. It's not only what you say, what you did, but it's the camera takes you there. The story can be told with the camera. And this camera that is always in search of. It's always finding, connecting dots. And in this movie particularly the need to go from one reality to a parallel reality, we had to create like artificial bridges to suddenly be in that world and coming back. We did a whole thing with a color about that. Well, the human world was the warmth world, and then the cold was the military strict, etc. So we even did things that in another movie would have been called out like a brutal mistake. Like when they have the guy that they captured that they're going to torture in this room that is like the bodega, and outside it's cold and raining, and they go in and it's warm. So it makes no sense in terms of the natural world that we're living, but we are announcing that this is parallel realities and we go in and out, just like the girl. The girl goes in and out. And actually we have to say that one of the incredible things about this girl is that she learned what the frame is very early in the movie.
And the lens, yeah.
So she allowed us to do all these very elaborate shots because she understood that. And there are many, many adult actors that don't understand that. And it was such a natural thing that she would just dance with us, and the camera was there. Always.
Well, from an actor's point of view, it is a delicate dance that we do with the cinematographer, especially when all parts are moving. We have our blocking, he has his blocking, and so when one of us has a great take, the other one may not. So it's always like, crap, I was really good on that one, or whatever. But you got to do it again. And whenever Guillermo Del Toro says, cut, check the gate, he'll watch playback one more time and say, let's go again. So there's always something that could be just that much more perfect.
But also, Doug is wearing he has no eyes and he's looking through a little portion of the nostril of the tail, or he's the fawn with completely artificial eyes, and sometimes he has to go backwards speaking Spanish, and he speaks no Spanish.
No,
But I remember on Hellboy, in Hellboy 2, one of the most amazing sequences ever is Johan, who is the guy in the helmet that was blind, and Abe Sapien, who was blind also. They throw a little bag at each other, and it was like 60 takes.
Yeah.
It was like,
yeah. A blind guy tossing a bag to another blind guy.
A blind guy throwing the bag to another blind guy.
Yeah. Actually, I wonder. I mean, I could go from top to bottom of the Fawn to ask, like, how were you? Because those are mechanical eyes that were in your head.
And noisy.
And noisy.
Noisy.
Well, because all the facial expression that was puppeteered that I couldn't operate, from the mouth down was me, you moving my own mouth, but it was mechanics, and the eyes were wider set than mine. They squinted. They had eyebrow movement. They had ear flapping movement. So that was all motorized and
All in the horns.
And the batteries were packed in the horns. It was a heavy head.
Battery packed in the horns.
Yes,
I like
and I have a skinny neck. So, it was the entire time that we're having quiet dialogue with Ivana Baquero. In the head, I had to watch her lips through the crevices in my eyes like this, hoping I got things right. Sin chistar. I thought I had the language pretty good, and then I said that one line when I was telling her to do something, sin chistar, and then this one for the next 2 days keeps coming up to me going, sin chistar. So I think I must have said it funny to him.
It was.
But how was that process? I mean, you were one of, if not the only American on a Spanish-speaking set.
No, we had the guys from the BFX company.
You did.
And also, I had a couple of crew guys that were from that I was. They did all the helmets with us, blah blah blah.
But
So we were carrying.
Eddie
like a big
Rastrosa and
food.
Everett Borrell were in front.
Yeah, right. But I would pretty much, when all the crew was talking to each other in Spanish, I knew it wasn't about me, so that's fine. I knew when I heard English that I should perk up and listen for my next direction. But they were so gracious to me, though. I felt very, very, very welcomed in Spain. Beautiful place, beautiful people. So that was
Great food.
And great food, yeah. If you have not been out to dinner until you've been out to dinner with that man right there. No.
Don't do it.
From 10 to 5 a.m.
Yeah, just let him order. It'll be great. Trust me. Yeah.
Did you have, I mean, we'll stay on topic for the film, but now I'm very curious. Do you have like a requisite that every meal must have?
Good food. I mean, I didn't get this far with Twinkies, man. It's well earned.
Speaking of well earned, I should make reference as well, in addition to Mr. Navarro's Oscar achievement for cinematography, the film also won for art direction for Eugenio Caballero's work in Pilar de Vuelta. Give him a hand. I believe we have Eugenio in our Stories of Cinema gallery speaking about his work. And also it won Best Achievement in Makeup for David Marti and Montserrat Ribe, without whom we wouldn't have that. And of course you were nominated for Best Writing Original Screenplay, and the score was also nominated, and it was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film of the Year.
Yeah.
So
Got a 6, I think, nomination or
Amazing.
7, something like that. Yeah, at that time, and for a long time, it remained the only or one of the few Spanish language films to be nominated outside of foreign. And it remained the highest grossing Spanish film until 4 years later or 5 years later. It was it was really strange because the movies that connect, you can never know if they're gonna connect or not. I thought I was doing it for a very small audience. Same with Shape of Water. I had no idea that anyone wanted to see the fish get funky, you know? And you know, I think that is the important thing is what I look the movies I try to do never make sense. Never makes sense. I've never pitched a movie that somebody went, oh wow. So, you know.
but it makes sense to you, your collaborators, right? I mean,
Yeah, Guillermo and I have been basically brothers for decades. So, you know, we believe in each other in spite of every indication that we're insane.
was there any moment during this film, Guillermo Navarro, where you thought, well, I don't know
He was
about
the
this?
makeup guy in movies that we were doing. Come
Yeah,
on.
and
We
story.
did Cabeza de Vaca and that, etc.
Yeah. We met when I was doing storyboards for second unit on a movie called To Die in the Gulf, Morir en el Gulf. And I was like, this is you're gonna shoot this with a 35 and, you know, and it's not the right lens. And Guillermo says, he was looking through the viewfinder and he says, look, kid, look, kid, you don't even fucking know what the lens is looking like. So go away. And I got angry and I was in front of the lens. I said, this is the bottom frame, this is the top frame, right? And he says, yes. And then we went friends.
And so, I mean, I'm assuming on set you guys have an instinctual almost relationship about how it's supposed to look. Can you talk a little bit about the green gel that was devised in this film?
You
Wasn't
mean
there a
the-
special gel that you guys had
Well,
applied to
still
have?
blue.
The problem was that we had to ground certain things in what that I was talking about, those transitions and all this. But also there was a detail that there's a lot of night work that we could not afford to light. So we decided to take the huge risk of do day for night.
Day for night.
And when you see the movie with all this treatment that the movie has, where there has like visual liberties, right? Then day for night worked because that was not the plan. Yeah? I wanted my cranes and my this and my that, but there was none. So we had to do day for night. And so with that, the use of that steel blue actually worked as a connecting color scheme with all.
The nights needed to look like day for night somewhat. And we knew that we needed a blue night that had carried a lot of warm information, meaning they needed to contain some yellow, so we went to more a cyan color, which was a steel blue, the filter. But it really, and then what we did in post is when she's looking with the lantern in the woods, I isolated that lantern and we made it warm digitally, so it looked like it was lit and so forth. So, but it was done with a very, very minimum because we had to build parts of the labyrinth, the other world, the and everything was done with a budget that was impossible to. When we do movies in America, sometimes, for example, Shape of Water, one of my producers, we had done Crimson Peak and Pacific Rim, and he said, "How much do you want to do the movie for?" And I said, "Under 20." And he said, "Impossible." And he made a budget that was 35 and the rest and 30, and he said, "Maybe we can do it for 20." And I said, "Well, I'm gonna find someone that likes 19." And thank you. And we parted ways. We're friends, but I found somebody that went 19. Sure, let's try it. You know. So it's the same way with Guillermo, and we work like that.
And it also has to do with the fact that we know the work, and we know what it takes to do it. And also, this movie had like that kind of requirements that where the narrative was very visual and the camera was going to be really the actor of that. That we did things completely different than what a conventional movie is. There's no coverage in the movie.
No, never.
The only scene in the movie that actually we were suffering while we were doing was the dinner.
Yeah.
Because you have all those people seated, you have to sort of cover when the line is here, the line is there.
Horrible.
But here, and that's why, because the camera has to move. There's one scene that we did it in a single shot, and all the coverage is with the movement of the actors and the camera.
Yeah. No, we until Nightmare Alley, we shot zero coverage. We edited on camera basically, and that scene that he's referring to is what I call the Columbo scene, because it says one more thing.
The Columbus.
Columbo scene. Yeah, it says wait, there's one more thing. But we did that. The only coverage was that dinner scene, and by the way, the goat was decomposing, el cabrito. It was putrefying, and it smelled horrible.
You know, you were also asking about the unspoken direction
Yeah.
of things. Guillermo is unlike any other director I've ever worked with before. He understands his actors, each one of us with our own personalities. And we had already worked together a couple times before Pan's Labyrinth, so he already knew what buttons to push on me and what pre-production incentive to give me for both the Fawn and the Pale Man characters. We had filmed the first scene. I think my first scene that I filmed was at the labyrinth mouth with the dagger and asking for the baby. And so we got through all that, and I think it was about a week later, he came up to me on set when I was in my resting chair, which was a bicycle seat with a T-bar that I leaned forward on because I had a tail sticking out of my ass. I couldn't So I'm kind of like, I hear his footsteps coming up, and he put his hand on my forearm and he said, "I know you have not heard much from me, my friend, but it's because you're doing it right." So he had not directed me much. He just tells me where to go, and so that's very lovely when a director trusts what you're doing.
And we said that day, that night, I said, "Let's Mick Jagger and more Bowie."
right.
And when you were gesturing, I said, "Let's Mick Jagger and more Bowie."
More Bowie. Right. Right. And then now the Pale Man, I did a flipperoonie in the Pale Man scene as well. The first thing we shot of that sequence was me coming down the hallway after Ivana, and I thought I heard Guillermo tell me to be disjointed and floppy. So my first rehearsal run was disjointed and floppy, and he's like, "No, where did you get that from?" So he said, "Give me more of a George Romero zombie." Boom, got it. So I stiffened everything up, and that's what you ended up seeing.
So please. So if you were a George Romero zombie for the Pale Man, what was the reference for the Fawn?
Oh, well, the Fawn being a combination of man, goat, and tree, I had some research to do, didn't I? But right. Guillermo did give me, the notes he gave me were to kind of look at the hind quarter of barn animals, a cow, a goat, and see how their hooves meet the ground, and how do they shift their weight, how do they shake off flies. Can you work that in somewhere? So if you saw the goat having a little spasm, that was me going, in a couple places. That was from that note, and I think it was lovely. It was a great note.
And the Fawn goes through 3 ages.
Right.
First is the old Fawn, and the pit, and he moves really, very painfully and slow, and then the final one is very much the glam rock star.
Right, right. If you notice, the Fawn ages backwards as the movie progresses.
It
So
becomes beautiful at the end.
yeah.
But I mean, how is that for you as a performer? You know, because the behavior of the fawn sort of develops as well. It's not just the facade. And I'm assuming, since you said that the dagger sequence was what you shot in the first day, it was likely shot out of sequence, like so many movies. So how is it for you as an actor to know, like, now I'm slightly older, grumpy, I mean, other than the makeup,
Right.
but like how to keep yourself in that
Right,
space?
right. Well, we had it was a little you know, chronological sort of like, where are we in the story right now? What came before? What's coming up? Okay, got it. And the Oscar-winning makeup team of DDT Efectos Especiales, they had several different looks ready for me in that progression of aging backwards. So as the look was going on, I think it took 5 hours to get into the Fawn and 6 hours for this guy. So during I had some time to live in the look of the day, whatever we were shooting that day, so I could get in that. Also, the visuals did help me find where I was supposed to be that day.
And I mean, I also have to ask, is it true Ivana this was her first film as well that she had been in?
She had done a horror movie where she played sort of a ghost. It was called The Mechanical Girl, and the movie was called, I think, Darkness, by a Catalan director, Jaume Balagueró. But it was just like The Monster in the Dark. This was her first, certainly her first big role, or with lines. And but the interview was very impressive. When we every movie you do with kids, you see around 130 is really a horrible number, and you find one or two if you're lucky, you know. So we went through it came down to her and a very, very young, very moving little girl, and I thought, you know, I think Ivana had the range and the intelligence. What I do when I direct kids, I talk to them like an actor. I don't talk to them like kids, because they are far more intelligent than people give them credit for. I was a kid and I was 70 when I was 7. You know? So I talk to her exactly like an adult actor, and she executed with great precision. She's one of the most precise actors I have worked with at that point.
I mean, was it tough for you, Tuck, as you're kind of this horrific character acting against a young girl who, you know, you might have concern, is she genuinely scared about the way I look and the way I'm behaving? I mean, did you have to sort of modulate or build a relationship there to sort of help her create a relationship with you?
Yeah, well, she was far beyond her years, as we've all said. She was very mature going into it. We invited her into the makeup room as I was getting ready one day, and that helped. And anything that was left, any fears that were left, were gone that day. Because she saw it was just this goofy, tall, skinny guy in there, and so we had a little chat as they were putting things on me. She was 11 at the time, I think, playing a 9-year-old. Does that sound right?
Yeah, but to demystify all that, in reality, you're gonna see this guy eating bagels and a fucking juice.
Exactly.
You know,
Right.
you know, he's gonna be complaining or talking about the Dodgers. They're scary to watch, not to shoot.
The tough part too was our size difference. I was 7 feet tall in those stilts, and she was, you know, so I kept, Dougie, can you squat more? So I was kind of, you know, constantly.
The 185.
I mean, can you talk a bit, because weren't the legs that were designed for the fawn kind of your own invention?
Yeah, nobody had done them before, and I mean, I was a makeup effects guy for 10, 15 years when I was starting, because nobody would do the effects on my short films. So I said, okay, I'm gonna learn and I'll do them myself. And then other people started asking me for help, and I came up with the idea of the front being green and then articulating it in the back. And I think it's the first time it was done. It was mainly because we had no money. And in fact, in a couple of shots, if you watch really, really careful, the shadow has the leg. The shadow has the human leg in the front.
I didn't know that.
We couldn't pay. It's like Kronos was gonna be called the Kronos device, and in Spanish, la invención de Kronos. And we had no money for the fucking typeface. Literally, the lady that designed the typeface said, "You have to pay me 300 per letter." I said, "Oh, let's call it Chrono." It's true. When people talk about vision, and I believe there is an aspect of this that transcends and is poetic and magical and beautiful and pure art, and we can talk about it to your heart's content. But the other part is very, very common. We're trying to make our day, and we're trying to stay on budget. So there is a factor in which you are creating magic with a train behind you at full speed, and you're on a motorcycle. So it's an extremely reality-based craft. It's basically directing is hostage negotiation with reality. The reality comes and says, "I'm gonna shoot your fucking day," and you go, "No, I'm gonna save it." And sometimes reality blows the brains out of the day.
But how do you do that? How do you show up to set every day knowing that that's going to happen?
Because it's what Guillermo said, is if you know your craft and the more tools you have, the more you know, you learn to identify a very simple truth. It's two parts, if you don't mind. One is for every solution in 30 years, there's an elegant and ideal, for every problem, there is an elegant and ideal solution. For every problem, I guarantee you that, after 30 years. And the second one, which is a little harder to identify, is the problem is the way. The obstacle is the way. Whatever obstacle you have is telling you what to do for the good of the movie. And that takes a lot more experience, but you learn to identify it. So everything, we say, "Oh, we cannot use fire." And Guillermo says, "You know what? I use this type of light in a commercial I did. Why don't we use that?" And I say, "Okay, let's use mud with water." That's the obstacle, and that's why the night is beautiful, because we're lighting that steam. Imagine if we were using regular explosions. Instead, it's a magical night lit by Guillermo with steam and mud, and it's better. So,
It's very elemental as well, which also kind of appeals to the motifs of the film.
every problem we had in this movie led to a better solution. The pigeon coop, which we had the torture scene with the stuttering guy, was gonna happen in that pigeon coop, which it was fantastic. The circular, a lot of dishes and and we had to do it in the bodega, in the warehouse, and it came much better. We used sort of the searchers, that the framing of the bodega, the guy in the foreground. It becomes better. So it's about no matter who you are, Kubrick, Spielberg, whoever you are, the day ends up at night, the sun sets. If a hard wind is coming, it's gonna blow the sets away. You gotta deal with it.
As well, and when you're making the film, I also wanted to ask about some of the other conscious kind of artistic decisions. That in Ophelia's world, things are quite rounded. In the fascist world, things are much squarer.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that, again, was by design, or was that something that you kind of chanced? Everything by design?
No, completely. I mean, before anyone comes in on a movie, when I direct, I start before the production designer, before Guillermo, before anyone comes in. I hire 2 or 3 concept guys, and I set the basic rules of the language: color, shape, blah, blah, blah. And when everybody comes, they add an extra layer and make it better, and then but it's the common language that has a reason, as Guillermo says, to story and to character. It's not about beauty, it's about telling the story and the character, and it's what I call eye protein instead of eye candy. It's something that actually is nutritious and tells the story, and is beautiful to look at. So that's in every movie, no matter what. Like the next one I'm preparing, I start in 2 weeks, and it's not gonna shoot until February next year. Yeah. We're gonna do about 6 to 7 months of what I call the submarine, and then we go and talk to everybody.
I also want to ask, because this film is tied chronologically, correct me if I'm wrong, to when Bleak House was launched.
Yeah.
Because this film is 2006, you opened Bleak House in 2007.
Exactly right, yeah.
Was that, I mean, was that by chance? Sorry, I keep asking these things that are by chance. They always turn out to be by design. I'm sure that's also by design.
No, what happens is this: I really think I had to make a decision about what was I gonna do with my life, I thought, I was 42, I think I was, and I thought, first of all, I want to have the house I dreamt of when I was 7, because if I don't do that, I drive a shitty car, I dress like crap. I can have a house with a secret passage, that's reasonable. And I thought about that, and then I thought also, I will only, it was already a thing I was doing, but I said, I will only do the movies that would not exist if I didn't make them. That nobody else would do. And they can be big or small, it doesn't matter. Just irrational movies that make no sense. And I thought when I was after Hellboy and Blade were successful, and I got offered every superhero movie they were starting to pick up. When I did them, they were not in vogue. They were sort of crazy stuff. But then I got offered a bunch of Marvel and a bunch of this other, and I said, I was thinking about it because it was very tempting. And I said, do I do Pan's Labyrinth or do I do a big movie? And I was in a cab in London and I lost my notebook in the cab. And I thought, this is a sign from, I'm ex-Catholic. So a lot of time I think God is thinking of me. It's just a lot of vanity. I said, I understand, Lord. I'll do Pan's Labyrinth, but give me my notebook back. And they brought me the notebook back. The taxi driver brought the notebook back. And I said, okay, so I'm doing this one.
And can you something else that is some of the amazing dichotomies that always appear in your work, and I think this you've touched upon it in what you're saying, is this kind of juxtaposition between disobedience and instinct. And in a way, what you're describing is, because you said when you pitch your movies to people, no one ever gives you an enthusiastic yes. And do you think that's, can you speak a little bit more about that notion in the film of disobedience, and do you feel yourself disobedient to expectations of what a film should be?
Oh, yeah.
Of what
Look,
fantasy should be, of what is...
I'm a Mexican filmmaker, and all my life people have been telling me what fucking movies I needed to make. And I haven't been obedient to any of that shit. Because it's like everybody in Mexico, when we were trying to do Kronos, the Mexican Institute of Film was completely against it. Normally it takes 1 year to get a movie approved, and it took me 4 years to get that movie approved. They didn't want to do it because it was a vampire film. And they said, we are in favor of art film, and I said, this is a fucking art film, even if it has a vampire in it, And I said, and why can we not make that? And why can I not? And when I said I want to do extravagantly fantastic movies, everybody said, you're insane. And I thought, well, I'm not gonna believe that. And even Pinocchio, what I'm doing, there's a great sequence where they say, lie, Pinocchio, lie more. Because I think that all these things that tell you who you should be and how you should behave are exactly the opposite of the path you need to take to become. One thing is being, and another one is becoming. And we exist. Somebody popped us out alive, right? And we started crying, and we exist. But to become is an act of will, and to become is an act of disobedience, because art is disobedience. Art is disobedience because it serves no practical purpose except to maintain your human soul alive, which is an incredibly impractical but incredibly vital purpose. So art is disobedience. Art is only attempted to domesticate by totalitarian mentality. Is fascist or dictatorial, or when the idea to obey seeps into art, it kills it. You have to, Picasso said, good taste is the enemy of art, and I think there is some of that. You have to do it your way, because by the way, it's like cooking. I'm not interested in the recipe that Martha Stewart published in a fucking book. I want to make my own pancakes the way I feel the pancake should taste. That's it.
I think that's actually a perfect note for us to wrap it up on. I
With
wanna thank
pancakes.
you. With pancakes. Thank you so much, Señor Guillermo Del Toro. Thank you so much, Guillermo Navarro. Thank you so much, Seth.
Can I say something to him?
Of course.
Just very, very briefly. It's been 15 years, so thank you for this celebration. This is the best birthday the movie could have. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye. Thank you.